Did curiosity really kill the cat? I don't think so. I think if anything, we've been trying to kill curiosity. What I'd like to share with you is why I think it's really important to be practicing curiosity while you're in college, because it sets you up to great success in the future. When we're young, and when kids are young, we have this sense of curiosity, a sense of wonder. And that's just a wonderful thing to see in kids, seeing my own daughter when she was a toddler, when she was a child. And that curiosity comes out in lots of different ways. In my class, I even try to engage students in that wonder, in that curiosity. And I even kind of like tell them, I'm going to act like a 4-year-old. And I do say this in the first, couple days of class. I'll say, I'm going to act like a 4-year-old. I'm going to ask you why, just over and over again to kind of delve deeper and deeper into their arguments for a particular strategy or whatever it might be, particular point of view. I'll just keep asking, well, why do you feel that way? Why do you feel that way? And, I say that I'm going to act like your 4-year-old because that's something that we see in kids that young, expressing that kind of wonder of like, why is this? Why does the sun rise in the east and set in the west? Why is this happening? But that's only one way that kids can express that sense of curiosity, that wonder. They can certainly do that by touching things, certainly tasting things, always tasting a new dish, a new, meal, having fruit, having chocolate, having vegetables. Some of them she enjoyed, some of that she didn't enjoy, but she was always curious about like tasting new things. When we'd go on walks, she'd be looking up in the sky and seeing a bird and hearing a bird and being curious as to why one bird sounds different than another. And it's just that natural kind of curiosity and exploration that kids are doing when they're young. And it's a great thing. And so I think we innately have that. Unfortunately, it slowly dissipates, I would argue, kind of dissipates over time. While we have that when we're young and maybe in preschool, I think as we get into formal education, we do tend to get into that kind of basic structure of learning specific bodies of knowledge. And so over time, that tends to dissipate. And I think that's a really unfortunate thing, but it happens kind of, I think, for a lot of people over their schooling years and as they get older and older. What is curiosity? I think we kind of know about it and kind of understand it, know the word and have some kind of idea of what curiosity is, but what is it? And curiosity comes in multiple forms and can be exhibited multiple ways, as I shared. But I would argue there's 3 different forms of curiosity. So the first form is anxiety-reducing curiosity. Think about the first day that you were on campus. You didn't know, what are the best places to study? What's the best places to eat? What parts of campus should I avoid at night? Even on the first day of class, where is this building on campus? And where is this lecture hall in that building? And where do I want to sit once I get to that classroom? So all of those are voids. We don't know the answers to those things. I mean, instinctively, we don't know those things. And so those are gaps in our knowledge. And so you start asking questions. You maybe get on the school's website or do some, Google search about good places to eat in whatever city you might be in. And you start doing that exploration to fill that void. Find out, ask classmates or people who have been, at the university for, a year or more and say, where are the great places to study? But once you fill those voids, they're done. You're gone. That type of curiosity, that anxiety-reducing curiosity, has a very finite life. A second form of curiosity is pleasure-seeking curiosity. And that's a situation where you have an interest, whatever it might be, and you're always curious about knowing more. For me, I don't want to say I've always had, but for a good part of my adult life, I've had an interest in World War II. I also have a great interest in reading biographies about leaders in a wide range of fields. I think maybe more recently I've had a greater interest in different scientific fields of study, particularly around genetics for a variety of reasons. So those are those are interests of mine, and I happily pursue those. All of you probably have those in your life as well. And they can have, when you're in college, have a direct impact on, maybe what major you pursue or a minor, or maybe if it's not really something that would turn into an actual major, but maybe it's a gen ed you might take, or a seminar you might attend, or a club you might join. These are, in many ways, an unquenchable sense of curiosity. It's not something that once I know this thing, I'm done. The question is, where do those interests come from? So these two types of curiosity sit kind of on the ends of a continuum of a curiosity scale, so to speak. But something that sits in the middle is this interest discovery curiosity. And that goes back to the last question of where do these interests come from? And that's one that needs to be fostered even more, is just digging into and developing these interests that ultimately turn into this kind of pleasure-seeking curiosities. And again, I don't know why. I can't harken back and say, oh, I know exactly why I have an interest in World War II history or why I'm interested in genetics. I'm sure I can go back and try to deduce maybe a reason, but really I don't know why. But those are the ones that we need to really try to develop. And I share in a different video some different ways to be able to do that. But the bigger question is, why even bother trying to create these new interests that aren't just filling a void, but are something that we continue to add on to over our life, because they are really critical. But why bother about that? Imagine you're cooking a meal and the only spices that you're putting in it is salt and pepper. That's it. Then imagine adding more spices to your pantry. Put in some oregano and, thyme and sage, adding in one of my favorite spices, cumin, and then paprika and even smoked paprika. And then here in the Southwest, have a lot of different kinds of chilies. So start putting those into your pantry. And then as you're making your meals, and certainly you can have a very nutritious meal with just salt and pepper, but then you start experimenting and adding in these other spices. And maybe some of them you only use once or twice a year, but they're in your pantry and you can pull them out when you need them, when you want them, and just experiment, blending things together. And I love experimenting with it a little bit by putting in different spices. I always will ask my family when we're sitting down for dinner, and I'll say, so what do you think about this one? And then that immediately makes them think, what do you do differently? I love experimenting like that. And the only way I can experiment that way is because I have a lot of different spices and ingredients in the pantry. So if you think it the same way with these interest discovery types of curiosities, is just simply putting more spices in your pantry. And they're there when you want them. When you're like interested in kind of blending things together, they're there. You have that knowledge. And so that's where innovations come from, is being able to blend these different spices of knowledge together and be able to create something new. If all you had in your pantry of knowledge was salt and pepper, then where are you finding these opportunities to blend new knowledge together to create some amazing type of innovation? And one that I always think about in this realm is with Steve Jobs. So, when he was younger, he dropped out of college, and then he refers to it as dropping back into college by just going to classes, not really being a regular student, but at Reed College, just dropping into classes. And he did this, again, during his kind of college years, even though he wasn't formally in college at that point, where he went to a calligraphy class. And it was just kind of like, it has no particular practical application, but he noticed that, all the posters around campus that were handwritten were all in these beautiful fonts, and they were all, done up really, really well. And it was just something that was a curiosity to him. It's like, let me go learn a little bit more about that. And so he dropped into this calligraphy class. He said at that point, there was no practical value to it. But then when he had founded Apple and was developing the Mac, he hearkened back to that time and even talked about that, of going back in time and remembering, oh, I learned about serif and sans serif texts or fonts and the spacing between letters. I learned about that in the calligraphy class. And so as a result, he put that typography into the Mac that then went into, Windows in time as well. And he attributed to that blending to that taking that calligraphy class. You have, hundreds of different type fonts. And all of that can be traced back to Steve Jobs going to a calligraphy class for no particular reason, but then 10 years later was able to blend those two, pieces of information, computer science and calligraphy, together in creating these wonderful type fonts. That's what I'm talking about is, take your calligraphy class, whatever that might be, just put it in your pantry of knowledge. And you never know, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, there may be an occasion when you're working, when you're 30 years old or 32 years old, and you're like, oh, I remember doing that when I was in college. And I went to that class. I took that class, that gen ed class, or I went to that seminar. I learned that skill. This may be relevant today. And now let me blend it together. Just believe that curiosity is something that you need to work on just as any other skill.